Actually, however, in the interval, in its slow meanderings from Egypt via Arabia and into Spain, and from Spain up through southern Europe into the great centers of European culture in the medieval period, in this period of wandering, the Hermetic philosophy began to change its shape, change its presentation. Much of its so-called broadness was lost. The original books of Hermes came to be regarded as merely the outer surface of a larger literature, and the entire subject gradually emphasized its scientific import and became practically synonymous with medicine. Thus we have a complete literature dealing with the medical arts, and, of course, one of the prime elements in medicine, chemistry. Chemistry, of course, in those days was without boundaries such as we know now. Chemistry in China, in India, Arabia, was alchemy. And alchemy was a fantastic conglomeration of ancient beliefs and modern experimentation. The alchemists were not, by any means, a group of quacks, nor were they an assembly of madmen. They were devout persons, serious scholars, deep thinkers. And in their thinking and in their speculations, Hermes became their patron saint. And this ancient philosophical personality ultimately dissolved to become the symbolic figure of Mercury, Quicksilver, a chemical element. So in his long journeys, Hermes passed from a demigod of Egypt to a medieval element. Now that was quite a trip. But the name of Hermes began to appear on the titles, pages, and among the emblemata of alchemy. He became accredited with the preparation of chemical formulas, means of transmuting metals. He was even accredited with the discovery of gunpowder. Now this is so totally different from the corpus hermeticum of ancient times that we must pause. Yet we must also remember the words of Clement of Alexandria in the Stromata, where he tells us that in this procession of priests there were some who carried the symbols of medicine, chemistry, and other arts. Upon perhaps this very slender foundation, Hermes was elevated to become the patron genius of medieval Hermeticism. This Hermeticism divided very definitely into two schools. One was that of the gold makers, whose philosophy was not, however, as superficial as we might think. They were convinced that there were analogies in nature, and that any law or pattern or process by which the regeneration of man could be achieved could also be used for the actual transmutation of base metals. On the hypothesis that all processes in nature have a certain uniformity and consistency, it was assumed that if man could save his own soul, thus transforming himself from a material to a spiritual creature, that he could also transform metals from the dross side of themselves to a more purified state, suitable for medicines and elixirs, suitable for the extension of life and perhaps the achievement of physical immortality. These gold makers, however, such as those who were so industriously occupied in the old street of the alchemists in Prague, Czechoslovakia, these alchemists were ridiculed by another group. This other group maintained that the entire Hermetic tradition, as it has now been called, dealt not with metals, but with the regeneration of the intangibles in human nature. If anything, they would have taken the position that if you can transmute metals, this proves you can transmute man. They would have reversed the polarity. They would have reversed the interest, affirming that the mere achievement of material wealth was an ignoble and unreasonable end, totally inconsistent with the divine destiny of man. These mystical gold makers then immediately began to reduce the chemical symbols and tracts and writings attributed to Hermes and other authors into metaphysical textbooks. Books inclined to reveal that transmutation was a kind of yoga, a kind of mystical regeneration within the human being, the man himself being the alchemical retort in which these marvelous changes might take place. And these same mystics assumed that Hermes, representing Mercury, Quicksilver, representing this mysterious agent in which all elements can be reconciled, that Mercury therefore represents the reconciling power of human consciousness, or perhaps more exactly, of the human mind. For Mercury becomes the key, the master of the mystery, by means of which all things are unlocked. And the medieval man liked to think of reason as this power by means of which all mysteries could be solved, all good things could be accomplished, and the interval between man as a physical being and man as a spiritual being could be crossed or bridged through reason and illumination. Man in the Hermetic tradition is no longer a toy in the hand of destiny. He is no longer an instrument subject to the machinations of unknown forces. He is no longer a pawn of autocratic deities. Man is the master of both gods and nature, not because of his arrogance as a person, but because he possesses within himself the power of reason. And by the power of reason, all things that are divided, broken, or injured can be brought together and healed. Thus, the healing power of unity, the restoration of division, the bringing of all that is necessary to man, and his ability to use it, digest it, assimilate it, and transform it from theory to practice. All these powers rest naturally within the capacity of the individual. The great hermetic art, therefore, is man's reconciliation of heaven and earth through his own wisdom, through his own reason. Hermes tells us, either as the person or as the embodiment, that all things are under the sovereignty of their superiors, and all things are servants of their superiors, and that it is the duty of the superior to guard the inferior, and it is also the duty of the inferior of every level to revere and obey that which is superior.
But the Christian apocalypse is a vision of a world destroyed, not transformed. And my interpretation of that is this is the nightmare of the dominator culture coming true. I mean, that world is going to be destroyed. But it's given to us, if we play it right, to actually take those hopes and turn it into a conflagration of transformation that will burn away the dross of history and recover and reunite the various parts of the human legacy in a way that will give permission for a sane and caring world. The prodigal journey into history was for a purpose. The purpose was technological prowess, the perfection of the tool-creating impulse. And at the end of history comes the ultimate tool, the flying saucer, the omniprogrammable Macintosh, the machine which does anything. And that perfected tool is lethal then in the theater of its creation. It has to be carried back into archaic nature, and we have to begin to deconstruct, dematerialize, retreat, begin a feminizing of our attitude toward ourselves and nature, care, encouragement, reflection, rather than dominance, utilization, destruction. If we don't do this, I think that our situation is fairly precarious. And the whole point of talking about psychedelics in this context is they make this something other than an inspiring after-dinner speech. Because you've heard this speech before. This is what all good guys say, but there's no hope for it without psychedelics, because they impel you to change behavior, to think new thoughts, to see deeper into reality, to aspire higher, and to feel more. And if we can't awaken ourselves to those things, then it's simply not going to happen. And all the means, the tools, the gnosis, the shamans, they still exist at the periphery of this doomed civilization. They still exist to help us toward a new understanding.
And out of the compatibility of minds, a unification may take place, and this may in turn lead to the final hermetic step, namely, that minds are compatible. But as man outdistances mind and elevates himself to a spiritual state, he passes from compatibility to identity. That in a spiritual condition, all things may be one. In mental things, a mental level, all things may be in agreement, may find common purposes and common good, whereas physically, all things can only be, as the old masters used to so quaintly state it, in vicinity. That is, close to each other in some way, but not achieving any internal union. We are merely projecting both our processes and our necessities. Therefore, we are bringing together procreating elements and fashioning them into a new vision. If this vision takes the form of More's Utopia, or Campanella's City of the Sun, or André's Christonopolis, makes little difference. There is nothing essential in these great social visions of the 17th century which have not since been realized. Yet in their own time, they existed only in the creative power of the human mind.